So as Jesse just said, I think he muted everybody and used the chat box for questions. And if we were at Urban Adama, and I'm not sure where everybody is because everyone's tuning in from different places, but Urban Adama is located on Chochenyo Ohlone land, historically tended by the Chochenyo Ohlone people, and is also in the Cordonices Creek watershed. I'm tuning in from Oakland, also Chochenyo Ohlone people's land, and I'm in the Temescal Creek watershed. A little bit about myself is I got my undergrad in environmental science, and then I was really wanting to study abroad, and I got a Fulbright scholarship in Israel to study water recycling. And I specifically looked at the fate of endocrine disrupting compounds in wastewater treatment facilities. And you can ask me more about that another time. And then I stayed to get my master's degree in water reuse. And I specifically looked at ways that we could reuse water on an industrial level, on a large scale level, specifically in Palestinian communities. But then also it was really interesting to me to come back home to California and see how what we do here with agriculture compares to what is happening in Israel. A little bit more about myself so that this can be like easeful and it's not super professional is I have a garden that I love. It's permaculture inspired. I love my dog Pete. He is currently sleeping and not tuning in. And something that gives me a lot of passion in the world is when small actions are done by a lot of people and it makes big change. And that is something I think is very true about Greywater. And you'll see today there are things you can do at your house that can add to big change. So now I'm going to invite you all to introduce yourself in the chat box if you feel that that is accessible to you. Go ahead and write your name and where you're tuning in from. And if you happen to know what watershed you live in, you can write that too. But this is just a way for me to get to see where people are coming in, zooming in from. So go ahead and post in the chat your name and where you're zooming from, and maybe your local watershed if you happen to know it. Hi, Wes. Oakland, Saucil Creek, nice. Janet in SF, okay. Mission Creek, cool. Rory, Oakland. Park Boulevard Creek watershed. Nice. South Bay, folks. Oh, currently in SF, grew up in South Bay. Anita from Berkeley. Zach in Oakland. Barbara in the Oakland Hills. Saucil Creek watershed, nice, okay. Lily, San Rafael. Miwok Land. Jeremy, Mid Pines, Merced River watershed, nice. Oakland, not far from me. My parents in Berkeley. Nice. Okay, so we have a lot of Berkeley and Oakland and a few San Francisco. And I do have a little bit about San Francisco in my presentation, but most of it is gonna, well, we're gonna be centered on the East Bay, but I have some San Francisco too. So this is the situation with water on Earth. 97% of the water on Earth is ocean water, it's salt water. 3% roughly, these numbers are not exact, is fresh water. And out of that fresh water, 70% of it is locked away in glaciers, inaccessible to us. And the other 30%, not all of it is accessible. Some of it's underground and inaccessible. Some of it's underground and is accessible. And then there's rivers and lakes. So that leaves about 1% of the Earth's water or less is actually accessible fresh water that we can access, which is a very small amount. So where does our water come from? That's a different presentation that some of you were at. The last one I did at Urban Adama, and we're not going to go through it all right now, but it's related to this bigger picture of water and fresh water. So as you can see here, you know, rain happens somewhere. We don't really have information on how that water actually arrives to our tap, But the Cliff Notes version that I'm going to let you know right now is here in the East Bay, our water comes from the McCalmy River. And when we look at where our fresh water comes from, a river is one of those sources. The other sources are lakes, wells or groundwater, and rain. So again, actually it's less than 1% of the Earth's water is accessible fresh water. It's a very, very small amount. And then where does water go after we're done using it in our house? In San Francisco, based on what watershed you live in, there's a dividing line here down the middle. If you live on the western side of San Francisco, your wastewater goes to the Oceanside treatment plant and then it gets pushed out into the ocean. And if you live on this side of that orange line, your water goes to the Southeast treatment plant and gets put into the bay after it's been treated. If you live in the East Bay mud collects your water if you live in any of these cities in this checkered area. And your wastewater treatment facility, singular, there is only one, is right here at the maze. It's the East Bay Mud Wastewater Treatment Facility. And after all of the water gets treated, it goes into the bay, right into the water. That's why it's so close, conveniently placed. So what's happening in other places with wastewater, with treated wastewater? In Israel, where I did my master's degree, 90% of the wastewater is reclaimed. They are also a coastal country and they do not put 100% of their wastewater into the ocean. What do they do instead? They reuse it. They use it for agriculture, they use it for industry. They use 90% of it. And what's happening elsewhere in the world? Spain reuses 20%, Australia and Turkey around maybe 10 and 11%. And in California, we use less than 1% of our treated wastewater. That's a big difference. 90% in Israel and less than 1 in California. Both are huge places of a lot of agriculture. Obviously, Israel is extremely small geographically in comparison to California. I think California is about 16 or 17 times the size of Israel. But Israel's systems of reusing wastewater started 40 and 50 years ago. It started when they were thinking about how water was being used in the country. In California, just thinking about reusing water has started over the past 10 years. So what's happening with rain currently in California? This is a map that I was looking at yesterday, a graph that just shows where we are at with rainwater. So this, I think you can see my cursor. Yeah, it says current. That's our current precipitation in the Sierra. And let's go up to last year, 2018, 2019. If you remember last year, we're like, I don't know, not even half as much as last year. And then year before that was down here. The year before that, whoa, remember that wet year? Tioga Road didn't open until July 4th weekend or maybe after, all the way up here. And then before that was the drought. 2014, 2015 was the last year of the drought, but who knows, maybe we're still in drought. And we are currently below 2014, 2015 precipitation. We're why aren't we talking about this? Like, we talked about how it was not a wet winter, but nobody is like, oh my gosh, look at our precipitation in comparison to drought year. So that's just, rain is another one of those fresh water resources, and we don't have very much of it right now. Another thing I just this is kind of the grounding for before we get into gray water is rainwater is actually not gray water. And I want to make sure everybody on the call knows that so that you don't get them confused. But rainwater is not gray water. And we'll go over what gray water is, but you could just write that down in your notes that rainwater is not gray water. And pictured here is actually a really nice rainwater catchment system that collects rainwater out of your gutter and has a beautiful planter box on top. These cost anywhere from $100 to $150 or $200, maybe at Home Depot or online. And how it works is there's kind of like a little spoon inside of here that collects water and brings it into the tank. And once the tank is full, the water will go back out and overflow the spoon and go back down normal gutter. So that's another cool thing. We're not going to talk about rainwater more today, but in case you are interested. So Greywater, we've arrived at the presentation that you wanted to hear about. Greywater Action is a nonprofit in Oakland that I'm an installer for, and I got all my trainings with. I apprenticed for about 2.5 years with Christina Bertia, who's on this call. Shout out to my mentor. And then after apprenticing, I attended a California State Greywater Installers training down in Los Angeles and went through a 5-day program to become a professional installer. So Greywater Action is an amazing organization. If you haven't checked out their website after this call, I encourage you to go on their website. They have a ton of information about Greywater. So what is Greywater? Everybody's on mute right now, but just like say out loud to yourself in your room, what's Greywater? Where does it come from? You can say it out loud to yourself or to the person sitting next to you. Yeah, you're right. Washing machines, bathtubs, showers, laboratory sinks, which are bathroom sinks, different from kitchen sinks. In California, kitchen sinks are not considered gray water because of the food content in the water. What is black water? Oh, I see a question. What about dishwater? Dishwasher water. So great question. So in California, dishwasher water is like kitchen sinks where there's like food content and it's not considered gray water. It would have to get permitted elsewhere. What is black water? Black water is anything that has fecal matter in it. So toilets, or if you're doing laundry and you're washing diapers or toxins like Clorox bleach, something like that, that's considered black water. So reusing gray water at home. Greywater Action did a study in Santa Cruz and looked at residential water use inside homes and found that residential water use can be reduced by 16 to 40% if gray water is installed in the home. And it's a big percentage variation because it depends what type of gray water you're installing, if you're just doing the laundry or if you're doing showers and baths as well. But that's a lot to reduce that amount of water use. So some of the benefits of a gray water system, this is my gray water system, and we're not going to go in depth about the details today, but these mulch areas with these green tops, that's where my gray water is going into my garden. And it's feeding my raspberries, it's feeding my blackberries, my 2 apple trees, my blueberries, and my boysenberries. Benefits of gray water: you save time watering. So I personally hand water my garden, and it takes a lot of time in the morning, and it's a beautiful morning practice. And there's also other things I could be doing in my garden if I didn't water. For instance, I don't have to water this whole portion that has the gray water in it now, and it gives me time to do other things in the morning or tend to other parts of my garden like weeding and pruning. Gray water also saves money on your water bill. You're paying for less water if you're reusing your water on site. It also saves energy. So transporting water in the state of California, I think California, on the California energy budget, moving water around our state uses 20% of our state's energy. That's a lot of energy. And so the less water we're pulling in from sources that are farther away, the more energy we're saving. Likewise, it also decreases potable reliance. So potable water is the water that we drink from the faucet. And from the East Bay, our water comes from the Mokelumne River, which is about 200 miles away. Our reservoir is about 200 miles away. In San Francisco, the water comes from Hetch Hetchy, which is maybe 300 miles from the city. And to decrease our reliance on water that's so far away is really good for resilience. If we don't have access to that, or if we can rely less on something that's really far away, then we have more power in our life right here with what we're working with in our daily life. Gray water can also help with fire resilience. The more water that's put back into the ground, the more spongy and wet the soil is, and fire would be less prone to moving through an area. So for instance, in Sonoma County, they're legalizing a lot more gray water and encouraging a lot more gray water because of it being a fire-prone area. For instance, after the fires over the past few years, I believe that in new buildings in Sonoma County, gray water has to be incorporated in some way. Another piece is carbon sequestration. So all the carbon that's in the atmosphere that's creating climate change, water and carbon are friends in the soil. And the more water there is in the soil, the more carbon can be sequestered from the environment and pulled into the soil. So the higher water content in the soil, the more carbon can be pulled down from the atmosphere and put back into the earth, reversing the effects of climate change. It also helps with local ecosystem improvements. So for instance, this bed that's pictured here where I have my gray water, I am not needing to put fertilizer or compost in it because the gray water actually creates really nutrient-rich soil, and that's improving this local ecosystem. And then generally when I think about the microenvironment of my backyard, the more moisture that's coming into the soil, the less dry my backyard is going to feel. And another benefit is that gray water encourages healthy product use. So now that I have certain gray water systems in my home, I'm thinking more about what products I use because it's only legal to put certain products back into the soil using gray water. And it makes me think more about like, why would I be using products that aren't good for the earth? So now I'm swapping out all my products and I'm thinking more about reading labels and looking at things, because if a product isn't good for the earth, do I really want it on my skin? Or do I really want it on my hair and on my body? And I don't. So gray water does really well with fruit trees, berries, perennials, and non-root vegetables, and we'll talk more about that later. So why has it taken so long for gray water to catch on? There are valid concerns. One is the pollution of creeks and bodies of water and groundwater. Another is runoff into storm drains or neighboring properties. So in the East Bay, we do not have a combined sewer system. Our wastewater gets treated in a wastewater treatment facility and put into the bay. Our storm drains do not get treated. They just go straight to the bay. And in San Francisco, they actually SFPUC captures all the water from storm drains and from wastewater, treats it, and then puts it into the ocean or to the bay. So this one applies to the East Bay, not to San Francisco. Contamination of soil with toxins or salts, exposure to humans, mosquitoes from pooling, and then a really important one is cross-connection and contamination of potable water supply. So if someone were to do a gray water connection incorrectly, there's a possibility that gray water could flow back up the pipes into the East Bay Mud or SFPUC or Marin Municipal Water District water supply and contaminate the rest of the drinkable water source. So that one is really important to think about when installing a gray water system. Because of all those concerns, there are legalities around gray water and what is and isn't legal. And part of the history of that is there was a group back there were a lot of people, but there was a group organizing to get gray water legalized in 2009. So in the years leading up to 2009, people went to Sacramento and went to hearings after hearings and worked on codes, and a lot of work and activism went into making gray water legal because of all of these concerns, to counteract those and make whatever gray water was going to be legal not have these concerns be a thing. So there's legalities to stop these from happening. And there was a lot of work put in through activism in order to make that happen. And something that came out of it is the California State Plumbing Code, Chapter 15, which goes over all the legalities of gray water in California. And you can find that on online or on Greywater Action's website and read through it. And part of what it says is the gray water can't have any contact with people or domesticated animals. So that means like no spraying or sprinklers. You can't have the water just get aerosoled into your backyard. No ponding or pooling or runoff, so it can't be above ground. And no surfacing or daylighting, so you can't have like a creek of gray water. No storing for more than 24 hours because of bacteria growth. No toxins, and no touching the edible part of the plant. So that means that gray water can be used for watering, but not for root vegetables. So for instance, you can't plant potatoes next to your gray water system because potatoes grow in the soil, and that would go against the code. So now we're going to talk about two different systems of gray water to start with. The first one is laundry to landscape system, which is a washing machine system that doesn't alter the plumbing, and it doesn't require a permit in California if you're following the basic guidelines. Yeah. So this is a little image of how a laundry to landscape would work. You start at the washing machine, and a washing machine has its own internal pump that it uses to function as a washing machine. To let water out and bring water back in, it has its own pump. And so the gray water system actually utilizes that pump to pump the water out into the yard and water the plants. And how it works is there's something right here, it's called a diverter valve, and we'll get a close-up on that. And the diverter valve allows the homeowner to switch their laundry water either to go to the garden or go back to the sewer. So there's always still a sewer connection in case of something like you want to wash baby diapers, or you want to have a bleach load, or if it's a rainy season and your garden is too wet already and you want to switch the water to go back to the sewer. So the diverter valve allows a lot of flexibility with how it's used. And some people even put in, more complex systems will even put in two diverter valves, one that just goes to the garden or to the sewer, and then a second one somewhere in the system that will allow for side one of your yard to get watered and then side two of your yard to get watered. But that's more hands-on, user involved. You have to maintain and remember to switch that. Another piece here that you'll see, this is PVC and it goes out, you punch a hole through the wall, it goes out, and then it switches to irrigation tubing, 1-inch irrigation tubing, and it's dug underground to follow code. And at each of the outlets, it switches to 1/2-inch tubing, smaller tubes. So the 1-inch tube tees off and goes out to 1/2-inch. And that's so that not all the water goes out at the first outlet, but you only want some of it to go out here and then some of it to go out there so that you get water all throughout the system. We'll talk about irrigation. We'll talk about drip irrigation at the end. So some things about the washing machine is you want to make sure that your yard is downhill or level from your washing machine. You don't want to overuse the pump on your washing machine because it could cause a fail in your washing machine pump. Excuse me. And you wouldn't want to go more than about 100 feet away from your washing machine to save the pump. And those numbers are a little bit flexible depending on slope. For instance, on a slightly downhill, you can go a little farther, but on more of a flat or a very tiny uphill, you can't go as far as a downhill. So here's a close-up of the diverter, the 3-way diverter. And this is coming from the washing machine hose. And then you can flip the lever to either go to the sewer, into the normal sewer box, or to the garden. This piece is an auto vent, and the auto vent prevents siphoning from happening. So it takes away the vacuum that would happen if you were to just pull water out of the washing machine. So you know how your washing machine, it fills up with water and it soaks and then it lets the water go. And then it fills up with water again to rinse and then it lets the water go. So it has this like increase in water and then decrease in water. And if the auto vent didn't exist, if this black and white device didn't exist, which is allowing air flow in right here, the first time the washing machine fills up with water and then it drains, the system would continue to drain. And as the washing machine is filling up again to rinse, it wouldn't fill up because it would continue to drain and continue to drain. So this auto vent allows your washing machine to work properly and refill to rinse and let go. These are two of the Greywater friendly detergents that I recommend. These pictures are from Berkeley Bowl, so this is local. They also sell them at the Berkeley Ecology Center. This is Oasis, made by Art Ludwig, one of the guys who helped make Greywater legal in California. And this is BioPack. I believe it's a little bit cheaper than Oasis. And I saw that there was a question about what products to use, and you can look on Greywater Action's website for more product recommendations. So cost for this, the parts are between $200 and $300, and you can do it yourself. It's in some cases, depending on your setup, you can do it yourself, and there'll be more information on that later too. A professional installation can cost anywhere between $700 and $2,500 depending on your setup, like how your yard is and what it looks like for the washing machine to actually leave, for the water to leave and get to your garden. For example, washing machines that are located on an exterior wall close to your garden, that's a accessible setup, and it's much easier to do than a washing machine that would have to bring the PVC under the crawl space of the house and then out to the garden, which is still doable, but it's just different types of accessibility. And then another thing to note about cost, in San Francisco, SFPUC gives a $150 rebate to anybody setting up a laundry to landscape system. So I highly recommend those San Francisco people to take advantage of that. East Bay Mud gives a $50 rebate for the 3-way diverter valve, that brass, this one piece. They'll give you a $50 rebate if you spend $50 or more on this one piece. And that piece you can get for different prices depending on where you go. If you're located in the East Bay, the Urban Farmer sells it, I think, for $70, which is very expensive. You can get it online for $20, $30, and Biofuel Oasis in Berkeley sells it, I think, for $27. So another system is called the branch drain system. And this one is more for showers and bathtubs, and it's gravity fed in this photo. So what happens is you take gray water from the bathtub, and you can see this pipe running here. There's the three-way diverter valve. It's not accessible. In the laundry machine one, it's right next to your laundry machine. You can just open and close it, move it back and forth. You can see it when you're doing your laundry. This is usually located in the wall in the internal plumbing, and less accessible, but it still has to be accessible in order to install this. Another thing to note here that's really important, laundry to landscapes don't require a permit in California. I'm going to say it again. Laundry to landscapes don't require a permit in California. Thank you to all the activists in 2007, 2008, and 2009 for making that happen, because we don't need a permit to do it. You could go do this right now at your house and you don't even have to tell your city. Whereas for the branch drain system, anytime you're cutting into the plumbing of your house, you can see that this plumbing is connected to where your toilet drains. Anytime you're cutting into that type of plumbing, that requires a permit. So a branch drain system, you would have to apply for a permit to your city, probably to the planning department, and get it approved and pay for a permit. So collecting water, divert it into your backyard, and there's a light slope happening. It's all gravity fed. You don't have to, your yard has to be located downhill from where your bathtub is. And at each point, water splits into different directions. This is an extensive one going in a lot of places and splitting a lot and feeding all of these trees. And I'm not going to talk about the specifics today about how the Greywater system works in the backyard. Actually, maybe we'll see if we have time at the end. But I'm seeing a lot of questions, and I think I'm gonna answer them at the end. But keep them coming. So again, branch drain systems uses gravity to flow downhill to the garden. It requires a permit. The fixture drain pipes must be accessible. So for instance, to be able to cut into your wall and know where that is. The pipes have to have continuous slope so that there's no backflow. And the flow is distributed by flow splitters. At each place you split, there's kind of a flow splitter which allows water to go in both directions, right and left. Cost for a branch drain system is usually between $300 and $500 for parts, and professional installation can be anywhere from $800 to $4,000 depending on how complex it gets, and you have to pay for permit fees. So I was not going to go over like the hands-on of really how to set up your own laundry to landscape system tonight, but we might have time to go over that in a little bit after we answer questions. This manual you can find online from SFPUC, the water utility in San Francisco, and it is a step-by-step guide on how to set up your own laundry to landscape system. It's a PDF you can download online. So I highly recommend, if you're someone who's going to go home now or you're at home, if you're going to go outside and look at more specifics, for this, because I didn't talk about all the specifics about the laundry to landscape system, I really recommend downloading this PDF and reading through it. The next piece is Greywater 201, which we're not going to go over today, but I just want to introduce you all to it because greywater systems can get more complex and do a lot more things. For instance, I heard a lot of people asking about the drip irrigation and more about irrigating plants. So filtered and pumped systems allow for more use of greywater. This is a picture of Urban Adama, where Jesse works. And it's part of their filtered and pumped system that's set up and designed by a company in Oakland called Water Sprout. And Water Sprout is doing really amazing things with greywater design. So if you're interested in a more complex system, definitely check out Water Sprout and what they're doing. It's also very expensive to set up one of these systems. But what these systems allow for is it allows for water to be used in more ways. One, you can filter the water so it gets to a level where it can be stored or used in drip irrigation. Currently, the greywater from laundry machines can't be used in drip irrigation because there's too much particulate matter. There's lint, there's suds, there's things that are in the water that would clog a drip irrigation system. If you filter your greywater, you can use it in a drip system. And then pump systems allow you to use the water wherever you want. So obviously, if your yard is uphill from where your greywater source is, you can use another pump to get it there. And it just is one more piece of the puzzle. I talked to the person at Urban Adama who maintains their current greywater system, and they said this greywater system, which is very intensive at Urban Adama, was a part of their building design originally, way back before they built the buildings. And it gave them some type, it's not called LEED certified, but some type of like green building certification to include this type of greywater that has filters and pumps. And it allows them, what it does is there's people who live on site at Urban Adama, and those folks there's dispensers in the showers, and there's certain soaps that are used and provided by Urban Adama. So all the residents living there are using eco soap, and there's signs everywhere that say this is a part of a greywater system, only use the provided soaps and conditioners. And those go down the drain, they get filtered, and then they get used and pumped out into the drip irrigation of the farm. So they're actually used for irrigation, such like is done in Israel, of reusing water on site for irrigation purposes to grow food. And it's extremely expensive. It's not cost effective in terms of, like, Urban Adama is not making any money off of reusing their water, which is a whole nother conversation we could have around water pricing and just how our society is in relationship with water. And yeah, so it's not, the system Urban Adama has is not cost effective. It costs more to do it than to provide normal potable water. But one thing that is very cool is our systems are currently, East Bay Mud is looking into ways to reuse water and have more of reclaimed water go to homeowners and go to businesses. And it's something that might happen down the road, and they're encouraging people to look forward to that, but there haven't been a lot of plans made for it yet. What's so costly about these larger systems? I just caught one of the pieces from the chat box. What is so expensive about them is, first of all, the technology used is expensive. So the Water Sprout sets up an automated system where you can see the number of gallons that are being put through the filter, the number of gallons through the pump system, and only pulsing out water when is needed in the irrigation system. So there's a lot of tracking, automated tracking, that has to happen in order for this Urban Adama picture, for that system to work. There's a float valve in the tank, and if the float valve goes down, then they need potable water to be dropped into the greywater bucket, so that can go to the plants. So there's like a lot of moving pieces, and it also requires maintenance. So the people at Urban Adama who work there continually have to check the filters, make sure they're not dirty or clogged, and check the automated system to make sure all the water is going to the plants as needed. So something else I just wanted to bring up here is resiliency resources. So in World War II, in 1944, an estimated 20 million victory gardens produced roughly 8 million tons of food in the United States, which was equivalent of more than 40% of all fresh fruits and vegetables consumed here. And so that's a really big deal to think that in a time like COVID, of people being home and resources being stressed, that this much food could be grown on site in local small food areas is a really big deal. And I think it just resonates with me right now in the time that we're in, of how important it is to reuse our resources and get local with our resources. So when I'm thinking about my garden, what are ways that I can increase gray water use to feed myself, to grow food, and provide more of my local resources to me. So your victory garden counts, or your gray water system counts. Small actions, if every single person installed a laundry to landscape system, think about how much water that would save. Small action times lots of people equals big change. And then this is just, we're moving towards the end here, and then we have lots of questions to go over. This is just to show people who live in the East Bay where our water comes from. Those of you who know me know that I'm a big proponent of knowing where our water comes from. This is where we live. And this is a pipe, actually 3 huge pipes that bring our water from reservoirs in the foothills of the Sierra, Pardee Reservoir and Comanche Reservoir, down through Stockton, across the Delta, and to the Bay Area. And in my personal life, my personal project that I'm working on right now is figuring out how and if and when I can backpack from my house in Oakland along this line, or along the line of the McCalmy River here, and up to Pardee Reservoir, where our drinking water comes from, all the way up to Highland Lakes, which is the source where the McCalmy River starts. So just food for thought of thinking about like where our resources come from. If you're more interested in that, you can sign up for my email list, and I'll tell you about my journey and what I'm finding along the way. Gratitudes, huge thank you to Greywater Action. And before they were called Greywater Action, they were called the Greywater Guerrilla Girls back before 2009. And big gratitude to my water mentors who taught me everything I know: Richard, Christina, Elizabeth, Laura, Art, Brock, Melissa, Kate, and more. Some of you are on this call, which is really special. And all of those who walked the waters before me and who have added to all these systems. And thank you, Urban Adama, for hosting this event and helping people learn more about water. So I'm leaving a lot of time now for questions, because I see how many questions we have, which is really good. If you want to stay informed in just water things that I do around the Bay Area, you can sign up for my email list. And this is, you can go to this website, bit.ly/UA emails, and the U and the A have to be capital, and the emails all have to be lowercase. So I hope, good luck with that. I hope you make it to that website if you are looking to stay involved. So Jesse, maybe now, Jesse, we can move to questions, and I and you can both scroll back and see what I missed.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, if people were asking questions as it was happening, and some of them got answered in the moment and some of them didn't. So maybe if you had a question from earlier, or if you have a question right now, maybe you can post it in back in the chat box, and Nina can try to answer them now.
I'm just gonna scroll through and see. Oh, fabric softener. I don't put fabric softener into my Greywater system. I look for like no phosphates, no sodiums, no sulfates, if possible. Just like yeah. Oh yeah, Christina said, Jesse, is that big tank at Urban Automat actually holding gray water or just rainwater? Christina, I had the same question for Jesse when he posted that as the event picture. And I said, don't post that picture because people will think rainwater is gray water. But when I talked to the person at Urban Automat, that tank is holding gray water, and it's a part of their water sprout system that is filtered and pumped and very expensive and extensive, reusing a lot of water on site. Okay, I see another question. Any concern about the plastic in the rainwater collection barrels? How long do they last? Yeah, so I think plastic is definitely a concern. Plastics are now being made without BPA, which is good because BPA is cancer causing. And other plastics are also possibly cancer causing, and people don't know yet. There hasn't been enough research. And there's risk involved in a lot of what we do in terms of our interactions with new like new human made things like plastics. So I would say there is concern about plastic with rainwater collection barrels, but it's mostly if it's like exposed to sun for a really long time. And I also don't know that I would drink the water out of a rainwater barrel, but I would use it to put into my soil. And soil does amazing things with water. With the bacteria in soil are like miracle workers. Is it possible to establish a marshy, boggy area to receive and process gray water, possibly uphill from a pond? So, yeah, I don't actually know the specifics around setting up like a marsh system. I have seen it done, and I don't know if anyone else online wants to chime in if they do know about setting up more of a marsh type of gray water system. I can say that on a large level, I also work for the California State Water Board doing water quality monitoring of really large water reuse projects like wineries and more off-grid places, and they absolutely use marshes and that type of system to treat water, but it has to be treated to a certain level before it goes in the soil, and the marsh ends up becoming kind of like an after filtration. And definitely look at how far away that system would be from the pond, because there's regulations around how far gray water can be disposed into the earth, how far away from a pond it has to be. So you can look in chapter 15 for that. I'm going to go back up. Oh, I think someone was asking how much water can come from a washing machine, and I didn't cover that. So an old washing machines, the ones that are top loading, can be around 40 gallons per load, which is a huge amount of water. And newer washing machines, which are front loading, they maybe in the last 10 years, they've moved down to like 10 or 15 gallons per load, maybe 15 or 20 sometimes. And then really, really new, like if you've gotten a washing machine in the past 2 years, it could be as low as 8 gallons per load, but it's probably more like between 10 and 15. And all of that is included thinking about how much water you create from your laundry and where that water is going to go in your yard. all of that's included in the manual that SFPUC puts out around designing your system. And that's kind of more, we could, if anyone's interested in doing more of like a hands-on, how do I install my laundry to landscape system, let Jessie at Urban Automon know. And then we can do another talk like this where I actually talk through the parts of creating your own at-home laundry to landscape system. I see someone who said, should we be using these detergents anyway for the health of the bay, even if we aren't installing a Greywater system just yet? Yeah, I mean, as I feel like the more natural products we use in the world, the more that makes sense. Like, why would we be putting contaminants into our wastewater treatment facilities anyway? And that's a personal opinion, not a scientific one. So a question about showers that are detached from toilet plumbing. Showers that are detached from toilet plumbing, like if you just have an outdoor shower, it still has to be permitted just because showers are not included in what is legal without a permit. But if you don't have to cut into your own plumbing and you just know what's going on. Yeah, so just a few more questions on here about drip. Is in order to use drip with Greywater, you have to have a filter before it goes into the drip. My garden is higher than the house. I would love to grow food, but it seems like a big waste of water. Is there a different way to think about this? Oh, interesting. So when the garden is higher than the house and you can't just easily get your laundry water uphill, a few things is one is looking at a pump system of how to bring that water up, or to not use extra technologies, thinking about bioswales and collecting rainwater and using earth to move water around. So are there ways where it can be terraced and there's a swale, like a little hill that collects rainwater up on the top terrace, and same in the middle. So there's definitely ways to use natural earth to help move water around as well. Is the auto vent on the three-way valve a simple opening or more of a complex piece of plumbing? It's a part that fits into the PVC system to allow that air vent, and it can unscrew and come off and screw back on, but it allows for like you to be able to hear that the system is working. It kind of gurgles and allows for just that air pocket to get out, but for nothing to get in. So like nothing could go in there and clog it. So it's important that it's not just like a big opening, but it's covered and the air is going in from the sides. How easy or hard is it to hybridize an already existing irrigation system to utilize Greywater? So it really depends what type of irrigation system already exists. And for instance, if it's a drip system, depends what you're feeding. If you're feeding any fruit trees or perennials or berries or things like that, it would be really easy to transfer those plants to be on a Greywater system instead of on your drip system, and just keep your drip system for other plants that are, like root vegetables or that are in more finicky places. For instance, if there's hardscaping, if there's concrete in one area of your yard, but the rest of your yard is soil, you can dig the Greywater through the soil and deposit the Greywater in that area, but you can't move it through the concrete unless you actually remove some of the concrete to allow the gray water tubing to go through to the other side of the yard. Can you post a link to the handbook, please? I will work on doing that. Or Jesse, do you end up sending a post email that I could send you? I don't have the link handy right now.
Yeah, for sure. We can send that in a follow-up email.
Okay, so I will send it to Jesse. Are there any gray water systems in use in California agriculture in the Central Valley? So when I think about gray water, I think about it more on small scale, like laundry systems at each person's house. And in the Central Valley, I think more about huge reclamation, wastewater reclamation projects where treated sewage water would be treated to a level where it can then be used for irrigation in farmlands. And that's not currently happening in the Central Valley, but the state is making moves towards that. Like I know in Turlock and Modesto, both of those areas are looking into how they can start building infrastructure to make that happen. And I would say one of the biggest barriers keeping us from doing that is cost. It takes a lot of money to build water systems. It takes roughly $1 million per mile for a water system to get dug, mostly because of the actual digging out of a city or place where people live and having to redo everything on top of it. That's the biggest cost. But we were talking in a high school class I teach, we were talking to somebody from the Central Sanitation District about their process in moving towards reclamation of treated wastewater. And he was saying the biggest barrier for sure is cost. And then the second one is what they call the ick factor of people not being interested in reusing treated wastewater because it's called sewage water or wastewater, and people just think it's gross to reuse that. And so there's a psychology piece that has to change in California if people are really going to push for that to happen. For instance, last year, there was a bill that made it to Sacramento that was going to make it mandatory for a certain percentage of treated wastewater to go back to the land to be reused. And it was going to decrease the percentage of treated wastewater that could go into the ocean. So if there was a smaller number that was allowed to go into the ocean, it means that a higher number would have to be reused legally. And that bill didn't go through because there wasn't enough public support. So if all of the small people band together to make a big action, we would have a lot of change. So that's kind of what the push is that we need right now in California, is for people to say that they do want water to